Well, since 2016, photographer Jim Schlett has experienced 6 different units within the National Park Service as an artist in residence, and he's got a couple more in his schedule for 2019, and who knows, it could grow from there. We're very happy to have him join us on Big Blend Radio today to talk about his beautiful work and his park experiences. Plus, we also have Tanya Ortega, the founder of the National Parks Arts Foundation, back on the show. And the National Parks Arts Foundation really has quite the lineup of artist in residency opportunities. You can be a photographer like Jim. You can be a poet, a musician, a writer. You could be a dancer. You could be all kinds, anything.
You could be anything creative.
And you could apply to be a National Park artist in residence and stay in a park unit for a full month. And their residencies range from the Dry Tortugas out in Florida and the Keys. You can stay on a beautiful private island. You know, come on. You could go to the Hawaii volcanoes. You could go to Chaco up in New Mexico. And you could go to Gettysburg, and Jim has experienced that. So very excited to have him join us on the show. Jim, how are you?
I am great. We're getting over 3 days of rain, but everything has turned as green as Ireland looks like.
Oh, wow.
Cool.
So are you in New Jersey or Virginia today? You never know.
We're in Virginia. Right. Well, originally I'm born and raised in Virginia. We moved down here about 40 years ago, and we're about 35 miles outside of Washington, D.C.
Wow. Wow, beautiful country, huh? We haven't been there yet. I don't know if you know, Nancy and I travel full-time now on our Love Your Parks tour to go and visit and document all of America's parks, national park units, BLM land. You know, if it's a community park where people are playing in the playground, even that gets on our list. So we're looking forward to Virginia because we keep talking with people in Virginia, and it just sounds like we need to go there. Is it that beautiful?
It is that beautiful, and I would highly recommend spring and fall versus summer, because in the summer we have not only high temperatures but unbelievable humidity, which can turn some people off. But if you're here in the fall or spring, those are just ideal times to be around this state. And also the same is true for getting up to Maryland and getting over to the border of Pennsylvania to see Gettysburg.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you for that. So your website, I want people to see your photography, photomanva.zenfolio.com. Is that the best place for people to go to?
That's the best place. And then as you scroll down the page, there's individual galleries based on either the national park or the subject matter.
I mean, people could be looking at baseball with you, too. You get into the action.
Yes, I've been at like 15 spring training camps over the last 20 years, and they've just been almost as good as the national parks.
Wow. Oh. See, now I like baseball games, but it's going to be for a completely different reason.
Uh-oh. Here we go.
Hey, you know, it's men in uniform. Just saying.
Oh.
Well, you know,
there's a lot of pictures of men in uniform in the website.
I know. I spend a lot of time looking at them. Tanya, welcome back to the show. How are you?
Thank you for having me. I'm great. It's a beautiful day here in Hawaii.
You know, you never know with you, because I know you're often traveling again a little bit. But are you at the Artist in Residency House that's for the Volcanoes National Park residency?
I am, and we are overseeing a few changes to the house. As you know, we put in a small sound studio, as well as still being worked on the painting studio, and we decided, and we're very lucky to be able to put it's a sort of deck that we made big enough for dancers and performative arts. It's a pretty good size, so they'll have even more space to do work, which is our goal, to provide as much as we can. So it was we were deviating a little bit, but felt like it was important to get that done in case an artist that needs it applies.
Awesome. You guys rock, right?
Cool.
And everyone, go to the website, nationalparksartsfoundation.org. And if you're interested in applying, really, here's the deal. Go to Facebook, go to Twitter, Instagram, but really go, again, nationalparksartsfoundation.org. Sign up for their newsletter, because there's opportunities. Sometimes I'll get funded with a grant, and the grant's like, well, you better get, like, so many artists within, like, 1 month. And you don't want to miss that opportunity, and so you're going to want to get those notices, those notifications. Very interesting. I know, Jim, you've been to Gettysburg, and this is, when a lot of times we think about national parks and places like Hawaii volcanoes and Death Valley, which I know the National Parks Arts Foundation has an opportunity there for artists, but Gettysburg, sometimes we don't realize that a historical park is also part of the National Park Service. Is that something that you kind of, when you were there, did you pick that up from visitors there, that you wouldn't think that that's actually a National Park Service unit?
Actually, I would say almost quite the contrary. Most people who come there are fully aware it is a national park. There's signs everywhere about the national park, the ranger uniforms. And in the East Coast, there's this unbelievable interest in still the Civil War. So you just have people who have read stories. And in a lot of cases, a lot of the rangers there, that's sort of a lifelong dream to work in Gettysburg or one of the national parks associated with the Civil War. And they are just so overwhelmingly filled with information of such detail about the battlefield that when you walk away either from a day or 3 days, or in my case 30 days, you just become sort of an encyclopedia if you really absorb that stuff. And I think most visitors, it really leaves a very profound impression on them when they leave, even if they're just there for a day.
Everybody I know that has been there, there's something that brings them back and back over and over again. Our friend Alan Spears, he works with the National Parks Conservation Association, and that's what started him into his career as protecting parks and also historical sites. Was as a kid, his mom taking him, he was in Maryland, I think, was in back east for sure, as a little kid to Gettysburg, and that was his first real national park unit. And he just, after that, he kept going back every summer. A little boy, and he got his little uniform and everything, and he's like, everybody else is playing cowboys and Indians. He's like, no, I'm playing Civil War. I'm going to get you.
Right.
He's not like that actually, but he really now he is a protector of parks, and so many people that go there just keep going back, and we haven't been there yet. But I was reading in one of the magazine articles that you're featured, and you've been in numerous magazine articles with your photography, and well-deserved for sure. And we're excited to feature your 10 Q&As, your questions and answer feature in our Parks and Travel magazine for our summer-fall issue. But something I didn't realize, and we've interviewed a number of photographers and artists who have been to Gettysburg, but from one of the magazine articles I read that this is actually one of the first sites where we have photographs of the actual battle, of the Civil War battle, that the photography played a role.
Yes, and I was also at Manassas, and last year I was fortunate enough to be chosen for 4 parks. Kentucky, which most people have never heard of, Mountain Park, but it's also known as the home of Camp David, which everybody immediately recognizes. Gettysburg, Manassas, and one in Nebraska called the Homestead. And we found this unbelievable connection with all 4 of those parks to Abraham Lincoln. And in Manassas, for instance, and therefore in all of the battles afterwards, he issues the first press pass to a photographer after the battle, to Matthew Brady, 3 or 4 days after Manassas. And that's how photographers wind up covering most of the war and really sending pictures back eventually to newspapers in New York and Philadelphia and Richmond and Atlanta of what the real war looked like, because back then they couldn't take action photographs. They would take pictures of the carnage on the battlefield a day later with, hundreds of dead bodies strewn all over the place. And it really woke America up to just really what a war really is. And you still feel that in Gettysburg and those kind of parks today.
Wow. And, Tanya, I think it's interesting, doing the National Parks Arts Foundation with your residencies. At the same time, it was in the National Park Service. Didn't we actually get that program running because of photographers and artists like Thomas Moran as an artist, but also photographers were part of creating the National Park Service.
They really were, and you're exactly right. I can't remember his name right now, but with Thomas Moran, a photographer was sent to Yellowstone.
I think William Jackson.
Yeah,
that's right. That's right. Yeah. And so it is, as a very integral part in shaping the parks, as well as arts in the parks. But that was, I don't want to say the beginning of photography, because that goes back many, many more years prior. But a lot of people, and it's interesting because when a lot of people think of the parks, because the Moran paintings were so influential in getting the park started, that they don't remember, like I just didn't, the photographer, or his name, who was there also. So a very important part in getting the park started. Without that, who knows what would have happened? And, the paintings and the photography. Exactly.
And the photography, like I think back to, like the Sequoias, you had Susan Priscilla Thew. She was a photographer, and this is in the late 1800s, and she went out on horseback just on her own, and I think she had a mule as well, and I think some guy was hanging out with her. But anyway, I think he was a helper.
Hello.
And she went. She was the one who helped expand Sequoia National Park into what it is today, and inspired Ansel Adams to use his photography to help even expand Kings Canyon, and even some of the work he did in Yosemite. Was the photographers not only helped starting the Park Service, and get that in people's attention, but it was to expand some of the parks and also create the wilderness areas. I think they were really more influential in the wilderness areas that we have, and it's taken a while to have the Wilderness Act, over 50 years now, but photographers have played that role. And Jim, for you, when you're doing photography, does that ever weigh in on what you're doing, what you're photographing? Or does that come later?
It does in a way, because I feel that most people are eventually going to look at my work are going to see one of two things. One is what I call my artistic work, which is a little bit more dramatic and abstract. But when I've been at a lot of these parks, I always make an offer to whoever the local coordinator is. Are there things here that, in a lot of cases, they don't have a full-time photographer or even a sort of audio-visual specialist. If there's anything while I'm here that you need pictures of, just for your own sense of what goes on in the park, let me know, and if I have the opportunity, I'll try to take them for you. And that's the kind of photography when I'm walking around looking for my work. I also take other pictures, and I've donated to each one of the parks so far another 50 or 60 images saying, if you ever need them, feel free to use them on your social media sites, that kind of stuff. And most of the parks have been extremely grateful for that. So I kind of view it when I'm at the park of twofold. One is the pictures for myself to, in my way of how spectacular the park looks. And then the second view is there's anything else I can do for the Park Service while I'm here. I've got the opportunity to do it. It's not out of my way. It's sort of on the way of some of my hikes and walks. I attempt to do the same thing for them, too.
Oh, I think that is really awesome, because I know from our visits to parks, we're often hanging out with the public affairs specialists, and they're like, yay, we get to take you on a hike somewhere, because we don't get out as much as we want sometimes, because our parks are literally underfunded in a lot of ways, and understaffed, and they need as much help. And I think it's actually our responsibility as citizens in this country to help in any way that we can towards being stewards of the land, of the parks. When we go in, it's like, just a few days ago, Nancy and I went into a park, and there was obviously a little birthday party that happened, and there was the little princess girly strands of plastic left everywhere, and we watched baby ducks go to try to eat it, and so that's what we did on Mother's Day morning, was clean a park. And unfortunately we did actually. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry to interrupt, but it's so wonderful that you were taking photos for the Park Service, and I would like to just interject a little story about that, and myself, of course. Years ago, when I was an artist in residence at one of the parks, they were trying to get funding for their visitor center, and they were failing. And what eventually happened was they didn't have photographs to show the Department of Interior up in Denver to be able to to fund it. So I happened to be there. This is years ago. And they said, hey, nobody here, we've been failing to get these funds to make this visitor center something that we really need. Can you take a few shots? And I have to admit to you guys, though the cracks in the walls, I made it it was there, but boy, those photographs ended up looking like the Grand Canyon. And they ended up getting $7 million to do the visitor center. So I felt like I did and they needed it. They didn't have anybody to just take those photos, and nobody could see what they meant without that photography. So thank you so much for volunteering to do that, because it really can make a difference, and quickly. So
exactly. And also photographing maintenance issues and things like that, and then the beauty, of course, But that's it. I think there's something to be able to each person do something for a park, And I think when you can, as a photographer, and you have the time, because isn't there a difference, Jim, being able to spend time versus if you're a day visitor, you're kind of getting that, here's your, the bum rush through a park, you're creating that yourself, but when you're there.
Yes, that is one of the true facts of when you get one of these artist-in-resident programs, and especially like one at Gettysburg where you're there for an entire 30 days, that you don't have to worry about what time you have to get up, because typically I was up every morning, an hour before sunrise, and I'd stay up into the evening when the sun was setting, that you didn't have to worry about getting back to a car and then driving home or going someplace else. It just opens up such a world of possibilities when you have those kind of opportunities that, like the Visa commercial, it really is priceless. You can't put a price tag on those kind of opportunities. And when my wife and I have come back from some of those, we kind of sit down for the next week just saying, did all of that just really happen? And were we that fortunate enough to be in that park for 30 days?
Yes.
That's so cool.
It's amazing. Like, pinch yourself. The other thing that I noticed in your answers to our Q&A, and everyone, you'll be able to see them up on nationalparktraveling.com right now, and also again in the summer-fall issue of Parks and Travel magazine, along with Jim's photos, which are incredible. You mentioned a few times the health benefits, and that's something our National Park Service, even during the centennial, when they really created what are they going to be focusing on, they're like, take a hike, go take a hike with quality of life. And it seemed that you really felt that. So, feel it still.
And my wife got us into this like 35 years ago with a trip to the Tetons in Yellowstone. And we started doing, 10, 14, 18-mile hikes, some trips on a single day. And we've kind of kept up, even though we're in our 60s now, a couple days in Gettysburg at the end of the day when I did my tracker, we had done 8 or 9 miles, not all in one trip. We'd break it up to 3 different portions each day, but we've stayed in very good shape. And every year we always make an effort to get to 1 or 2 parks, preferably new ones, and make that effort about the hikes, and that has a lot to do with healthiness. And also it has a lot to do with just making a connection with that park, that when you're on some of these hikes and you're kind of away from the crowd, there's just a connection that's the only time you can feel that connection, away from the hustle and bustle and chaos of everyday life. And, it's just a great feeling and a great experience to have.
What was it that led you to say, I'm going to go and apply for a residency within the National Park Service? Were you already a traveler to parks? Was that something always in you, and then you found out, like, hey, I could do this?
A little bit of both. We had always been to the parks. When I was with the Postal Service, I did a lot of traveling around the country, and typically if my trip would end on a Thursday or Friday, as long as you paid for it yourself, you could stay the weekend. So I would wind up staying weekends at spots all over the country. Once we went to the Tetons in Yellowstone, we made it a point to do that. And then around 2014, after I retired a couple years, one of my fellow artists had sent a publication around about artist-in-resident in Shenandoah National Park. And that got me interested. I started looking up all these sites about how to apply for the residencies, how to get into them. And I just made up my mind at that point I was going to attempt to get into one park in that program each year since that time. And As some of the residents will eventually tell you, you have to be very persistent and have a stick-to-itness, and sort of, you're going to get a lot of rejections, so just get over it.
Yeah, you just keep going and applying. And in your Q&A, you also talk about you learn how to perfect your proposal basically, and
yes.
get So you practice. It's not like, hey, I'm a brilliant photographer, I get in, but keep going for it. Yeah.
Yes, there's a lot of competitions. At some of them, one year at Glacier National Park in Montana, they told me they had 250 applications for 3 slots. So I know even if you're the greatest photographer in the world, there's a chance the review committee still might pass you up. So I've kind of accepted. Yeah, I've kind of accepted you're going to get a lot of no's before you get some yeses. And each time I get a yes, I just feel like how fortunate I was to make it through a review committee.
Tanya, tell us about your review committee, because this is something that we talk about sometimes. I know when the shutdowns happen, it kind of hurt a little bit in regards to people knowing whether or not parks were open to apply. But, I think every artist we've talked to, they say exactly what Jim says, is just keep trying, right? And being the person at the other side of the camera, too, taking the photos. And I know that you've been involved with other things, in the arts, than photography, too. You just kind of have to get that part of just keep going.
It's part of it. It's part of it. And I know that I've told you before, and the public and other people, one of the reasons the foundation started is because I have hundreds of rejection letters.
Should we start a museum?
So I just was like, well, if nobody's accepting me, I'm going to open this up not just to myself, but as many artists as I can. So with the help of wonderful people, was able to. But rejection is definitely a part of it. And I have to tell you guys, too, that the staff on this end, after we have to say no to so many great artists, really good artists, it puts us all in kind of a little bit of a depressed state, because so many people deserve it that don't get it, including, us, Jim, you and I, having applied and not gotten these. And but to answer your question about the panel, I think we have almost 100 panelists now, and we're going to be putting a call out for panelists. And what we do is we have some this is what a lot of them do for their career. They're curators at major museums, some in the NPS, but we do have an application process to be able to be a panelist for our opportunities. And in fact, if somebody, say, applies that plays a certain type of organ that we don't know about, or something that is a little obscure, we will find somebody who knows about this and vet them to be a panelist, just to be able to fairly, look at somebody's portfolio.
And so how important is that? Because I want to touch on that, because, a lot of times it's I submitted and, luck of the draw kind of thing, but it's a little bit more than that, because it's important for what happens with the National Park Service, right, and what happens for everybody. I mean, for that selection, the importance of why you have this is it's like a juried art show, right? Same kind of thing.
It is. It's, usually I think the average panelists we have on a single opportunity is 18, 18 different people looking at it. But, I mean, yes, it is not a decision of one or even 5 people, and it's sometimes a 5-tier process. So, there's a lot of people looking, and when this started, I had to hand pick people to just get it rolling years and years and years ago, of course, but that wasn't fair at all.
Well, you have to grow as the organization grows, and I think that's what makes it fair now, is having that amount of people look, so it's not favoritism. That's a thing.
Yeah, well, also that's true, and also one thing that we do that is different than the national parks is that we do have people, and I say art world, in the bigger art world attached. In the National Park Service, it's great that they have these opportunities for, like, fantastic that they do, and some of them we consult on and all of this kind of thing. But one of the major things that sets us apart is your portfolio is being looked at by people who really are at the top of the game. And I also have to tell you, because this is only fair, that we do keep them anonymous, because when we weren't, they were getting a little bit of people were contacting them, asking them to give their notes on their portfolio review, and they said, yes, sure, I will. I do this for a living. It will cost X amount of dollars, and because it's what they do. It's their job. And then the artists were like, what do you mean you're charging for what you do? So we had to, it was a little bit of, it was a little bit of a bummer.
Campaign contributions.
It's funny when the tables are turned in that manner. I know I did a stint where I was the director of exhibitions as a volunteer for an art club, a pretty good sized one, and it was interesting getting calls at 3 a.m. in the morning from one artist telling them not to hang their painting next to some other artist. And having to say, well,
that's why,
I mean, so it's just people.
Yeah, so that's again why, Jim, you say don't sweat it. Keep getting better and keep going in.
Yeah,
just keep going in, and look at how many you've been to, and you say you've got more coming up already. So it's like you keep going.
You have to be very persistent, and sometimes when I get those letters, I would I don't know why I missed this one, and then a week or two later I'd get a letter saying, we'd like you to come to our park. So I just said to my wife, if you're persistent, you play the odds, and if you keep applying, eventually you're going to have some that will just pick you, and you just never know the reason why. Like Tanya said, every year they've told me a lot of these review panels are very different. One year nobody liked your work, the next year they may think that's the work that should be at their park or something like that. So I've given some talks to local groups here in the Washington, D.C. area, and I just tell people, if you're persistent and you figure out how to do the applications, if you keep doing them, I'll tell you in 5 years you're going to get selected somewhere.
Wow. And so this all started for you with a Polaroid camera as a kid.
That's great. That was high tech back in the 1960s.
But now look at
cool
where we are now with digital photography. We've kind of got into that instant. Remember when we had to develop it or go into the black room, right? The dark room, which it's that is a neat process. I still think that's something very cool and everyone needs to be part of. But Polaroids had that instant, wave it, here it is, now I know what I took. And then digital photography, we still have that like instant gratification almost, right?
Correct. Correct.
Yeah, but we can now still doctor it afterwards. We can say, okay, this is not quite, because it's digital. And I think that with all photography, right? It's never quite, the coloring is never going to be what it was when you were in the field. The lighting and the color.
Right. Well, I think it's getting much, much closer with digital, but I still think there's so many effects you can do in post-processing nowadays that most people think they can improve the photograph, as long as it's a very good photograph to take care of. I've tried to tell people when I've done some of these workshops is you just can't take a really bad photograph and make it look great unless you want to do like abstractions or something like that. That you've got to have some sort of discipline about when you go out to take pictures. But digital photography has certainly made a lot of very mediocre photographers decent photographers because of the post-processing.
What do you think about people running around with cell phones and saying, I'm a photographer now?
I think it's good in one way because it'll at least give them the avenue to get to that point. I don't think necessarily having a cell phone makes you a good photographer. You really do have to look through some books and magazines, and there's hundreds of online courses nowadays, and some art courses would probably help. Because most people don't automatically have an eye for photography or a good picture. It's been very interesting when we've been on trips, and even at some of the artist in resident when I did a workshop, people were out on the battlefield with me that night, and we'd all gather back up afterwards and look at each person's pictures. And there was people there with smartphones that night, not digital 35 millimeter kind of cameras. And when we look at them, a lot of the people who were out there just randomly shooting without paying a whole lot of attention would look at some of the other people and say something to the effect, you know, we were out here together at the same time, we saw the same sunset, and how come your pictures look so much better than mine? And typically you didn't do post-processing there. It was because that person really saw the subject, figure out the right angle, walked around to take it. And that's something you don't see with a lot of people who just use the smartphones to take a quick sort of documentary photograph, which is good for them, but it's not going to elevate it to the point in most cases where you're going to see it in an art gallery someplace or on a website of somebody saying we'd really like this picture for our park or something of that nature.
Oh, for your home. Yeah, to have you want to have something in the archives or in a home or, you know, the collection. And again, everyone, you can go see Jim's work because it really, you make me want to get back outside. And it's dangerous because we do a lot of that, but I still want to go back outside. Everyone, photomanva.zenfolio.com. When you're photographing, are you looking... because your composition, you get into the colors, just like you've got an amazing composition. Is it when you're photographing, are you looking at internally, like, I want people to see this, or are you looking at, hey, this is the color? I mean, what is it for you that just goes, this is how it needs to be? Are you looking at people going to a place, or this is to you?
Typically,
this is the art.
What I'm attempting to do is, if I try to go back to some books I read about Ansel Adams. In the 1940s, he was actually commissioned or contracted with the Department of Interior to make a whole series of photographs of national parks that eventually started the project but never finished. And I saw some of those photographs in a book, and what he simply was saying is, what I want the photographs to do is to invite viewers to either visit the park or at least have a feeling that they've been to the park by looking at my photographs. And that's what I attempt to do. In most cases, when I'm at a park, especially on, you know, like Gettysburg, when I was there for the 30 days, I went to the visitor center, I tracked down the rangers, I tracked down some of the volunteers. I said, look, if you were at the park and you only had a day or two, is there any unique places in the park you'd go to any particular times? And over that, I kept a journal, and I have about 75 suggestions I still haven't gotten to of places to go in the park that most people don't know about. I have names of people who have private land adjacent to the park with phone numbers of, call this person. If you call him, tell him I gave you my name. He'll generally let you on his property to take pictures of some of this stuff. And that's what I try to do.
I'm calling you when we get there.
Yes. I mean, it's just great. Or there's a great volunteer there by the name of Frank Orlando, who is just a wealth of information. We developed such a close relationship while we were there on the very first day. I hope I'm not rambling on this one too much. I had asked him for some information, and in the visitor center, the volunteers all wear blue shirts. And I hadn't paid a whole lot of attention, but he had a full head of white hair and a white beard. And as we're talking for 10 or 15 minutes, I realize how well we've clicked. I hand him a business card. I said, Frank, I'm going to be here for 4 weeks. If you think of anything else, give me a call. And he walks back over to the desk, and he gives me a 3x5 business card. And on the cover of it is a beautiful color photograph of Robert E. Lee and his wife. And I do a double take, and it's actually Frank the volunteer. He's a living historian, and he looks exactly like Robert E. Lee.
Whoa.
And he invites us to the Robert E. Lee headquarters building on Saturday. He's there giving a talk. And for the next 4 weeks, I mean, the guy just, and all of the parks are like that. They just have some volunteers and rangers that just make that experience so meaningful. It's really hard to tell people what that portion, in addition to doing your art and photography or your paintings, that portion of making those connections, I still talk to, I mean, even though we've been there, it's almost been a year, I still talk to Frank once or twice a month. You know, he's invited us to come back up here and see him and his wife. And, I mean, those relationships at each of the parks, as great as the parks are, that's an added benefit that I think if you stay more than a couple of days, and especially in these artist in residence, if you go out of your way to make connections, you're going to find you're going to make connections that could be lifelong opportunities of friendship.
Awesome.
I absolutely agree. I know that from
cool.
us on our tour, like, you know, we've got a lot of park ranger friends. And, Tanya, that is something that I've seen with the artists in residence at Gettysburg. Like, I look at Nick Collier, you know, who photographed park rangers in Big Bend, and just like Jim did with rangers in Gettysburg, the Faces of, it seems that when a lot of the artists go into these residencies, that they want people to understand who is behind the park, not just the nature and the history and what happened in the park, but they want to showcase the now. Have you noticed that, Tanya?
I have. I really have. Even just yesterday, we had a request to meet the NPS staff that they will be working with, and generally, it's you know, probably 90% of the time, the first time they meet them is when they arrive at the park. So it always ends up, every single residency, somebody has ended up lifelong friends. Every single one. So
wow,
cool.
Amazing.
It speaks highly of the NPS, right?
Yeah, and I just that's what I say. It's so interesting. There's so many things that happen in a residency. And over the years, we've been, you know, having these conversations, and I'm starting to see these thread lines of like, okay, this experience happens over here, and how connected the rangers get with the artists as well, because, you know, the artists, once they come in, this work goes out into the world, and it stretches far and beyond, and it doesn't end. One residency, that art can continue on for years and years and years, right, Tanya? That's the beauty of this too, for the park.
Forever. It doesn't seem to end for any of the artists. And you know, like I said before, somebody will go with their proposed project, a single proposed project, and they'll end up having 5 different projects that last for 20 years. So
the other thing is these events and workshops that every artist has, you know, an event that they can do when they're there as part of the residency, and Jim was talking about doing these workshops, and I know, Jim, you go to them too. But Tanya, that's something that every artist has as part of that residency. What was the decision behind that? Is that so that there's that connectivity between the community, whether it's locals or visitors that come in and get to understand the arts, and the park too?
Yes, exactly. And we have a very different, again, sort of comparing some of the other national park residencies, but we do not require but one event. And we leave it up, the entire proposal, as Jim knows, we leave it up to the artist to propose what they want to do. And then we work around that. So we, you know, if somebody proposes 10 workshops, then we say to the park, do you guys have enough time, and do we have the venues, the materials to do 10 workshops? And they'll say yes, or maybe they only have enough for 5, or maybe 1. So we say to the artist, what do you want to do? How do you want to form this? And a lot of times these workshops are part of their artistic process. So whether it's workshops or a poetry reading, if it's part of their entire piece for the park, we should be able to let them voice that if it's part of what they do, you know.
Like if it's a dancer, because I know that, you know, we've got dancers and musicians, then that's going to be the big thing. You know, everybody's got a different part of it. Jim, what did you do for your event? You did the workshop.
Well, typically what I've done is what I've attempted to do is an evening workshop around sunset about sunset photography or the golden hour pictures. And it really depends on the park. in a lot of cases I've found the hard way is some people are there really to just see the park, and they really don't want to take an hour out to go learn about photography. I've had two experiences where in Manassas and Gettysburg, I had in Manassas 25 people show up. In Gettysburg, I had about 50, and we did do the workshops. In a couple of the others, I only had 3 or 4 people come up, and when I'd asked some of the feedback at the Rangers, they're probably only here for a day. They don't want to squeeze an extra hour in to talk about photography because that's not their main point in visiting that. So what I also did in Gettysburg, I had asked them one day, could we just do a talk at the visitor center? And they set me up with 2 tables. They set me up with a huge area for display. I had brought all these canvas prints. We just drove up to Gettysburg for that. And that actually was the most meaningful to me and most of the visitors because I must have had at least it was about 3 hours, about 200 to 250 people stopped at the tables, asked all sorts of questions about not only my photography, but how do I become an artist in residence? So I gave them all the information about Tanya's organization and said, just as long as you're persistent, stick with it. I said, and you have, decent work to start off with, there's a good chance you could be here next year doing this.
Wow, that's amazing. It's interesting because, you're right about some people are going through, they may be traveling to their campsite, and every park is going to be different with that, right? But it's interesting because I think there is that Q&A. Nancy and I know that about our tour with doing tourism seminars. At the end of the day, everybody just wants to know what we have to say about their park and or their town. What do we see versus what they see? That's an interesting part of it. And I think we're wanting that connectivity. So it's finding that thing. As musicians, people go, musicians, it's easy. It's a little bit easier because, hey, people do that. But I think it's photography. Yeah, I think that's one of the most important parts of what these artist in residency projects do, is that reminds people of the craft of photography in a digital age of cell phones and Photoshop, that I want people to remember that there's a craft to it. There is composition involved. There is getting up, God only knows hours to do it, and staying up to those same hours to make it happen. And photography doesn't happen just by drive-by. You're going to get that 1 out of 20,000 shots, but it is the time and a place. And I think, Tanya, that's the key thing. It's a month. Is that month that you need to get that shot. You need that time. You need that peaceful place to go. So I think that's a beauty. Nancy, I know.
It seems like after a month it turns into a, it just seems like the perfect amount of time. You start feeling very connected after a month.
Mhm. And then everyone else says there's not enough time. We want more than a month. That's what we've heard.
That was really true about us when we finished up the month, and that was the first time I had ever stayed at a park for a month. Most of them were just about 2 weeks. Is by having the extra time, I figured, well, we're going to cover everything. But like I said, I still have a whole big laundry list of sites to visit in Gettysburg that we missed. And we kind of had on the drive home this feeling of, boy, that month went by so fast. Mm-hmm. It's hard to believe it was 2 more weeks than all the other parks. So and that's the sense I got from other people I've talked to, too, is that month goes by so fast, it's going to seem like that really isn't enough time to do as many things as you were going to want to do.
You can't get it all in one day.
Well, we can relate to that.
True.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
We can totally relate to that. I do want to say when somebody looks at a painting or a photograph that they don't necessarily know the background of that picture or painting, and they're going to pick out something that relates to them, or they're just going to move on, and they may call it judgment without having any facts behind that painting or photo. And it's interesting how people do that. So it's a really difficult thing to produce paintings and photographs or any kind of art that would ever relate to everybody who looks at it. I don't think that's even a possibility. So I think when you're looking at photos, the photo that relates to somebody looking at it is going to educate that person to want to know more. And I think there's a huge value in that.
Exactly.
Right, and in fact, a couple people have looked at my photographs. I also volunteer at Travelers Aid Airport, Travelers Aid Group at the Dulles Airport, and when I've shown some of the people there my work, we had one guy who drives to Buffalo to see his family about 3 times a year, and he's been doing it for 20 years. And to get up there, you have to drive on Route 15 right through Gettysburg. And he goes, until I saw your photographs, I've passed that town must have been 90 times in the last 30 years and never stopped. And now, he goes, I spent 3 days there. He goes, I am so glad I saw those photographs to do that.
Oh, wow.
Exactly.
See, that's it.
That's exactly
it.
what I mean.
I swear, the artists, you know, photographers, I mean all forms of the arts, when I say this, are the best marketing agent for parks ever. They are. Again, it goes back to the beginning of our conversation about how that really resonates and you know, how we have the National Park Service in existence today comes from the arts. Before we go, Tanya, I wanted to ask you, when you look at summer, going into like July, August, September, anything people should know about? Can people still apply for Gettysburg? We've talked a lot about Gettysburg today. I know that's also part of the Veterans Program that you have.
Oh, yes. People need to apply. This year is going to be the fastest application process for Gettysburg ever. I think we're going to have them up for only 4.5 months, the opportunities. And we, as you know, in the past, we've had them up for a year in advance. But it's only going to be about a 4-month window there. So likely, usually when we've done this, it's going to be not as many applicants as usual, but we're trying to get on the federal funding schedule so we're able to offer the artists even more in Gettysburg. So it's a little, we're taking another risk here, but we're excited to see who applies. It's going to be really fast. And another very good one, too, is we just added the Death Valley Dark Sky Photography Residency.
Cool.
And that is going to be, I think we're going to have that out for, I think the selection is August 4th. So really quickly, and we've only had it up for about a week. We haven't advertised it. We just haven't had the time. And it was a spontaneous one. We had the chance to take it, and we took it. And despite all the risks, we thought, why not? And I think we've had one applicant so far. So please, that one's going to be, but it's very specialized. That one's you know, dark sky photography. So it's and all of the other ones, we're going to be having all of the Hawaii ones up for next year very quickly too. That's all of our things for 2020 are going to be ending in the late summer, even you know, the not way late summer either, and autumn. So everything is going to be up, and apply for them quickly. I hate saying that. It's such pressure. But we have brand new ones. We're looking at Glen Canyon, too, Grand Canyon, a lot of new ones. So we're going to dive right from 2020, and then at the beginning of 2020, we will have the 2021 to 2023 out. So
cool.
There's a lot.
Cool.
We're
it's
excited.
Exciting. So now, Jim, would you ever go and reapply for Gettysburg?
I would. I mean, it's that great of an experience, and to go back and to be in that farmhouse. I had told one of Tanya's associates after we came back, one of the really interesting things that had happened to me, and I didn't share any of these pictures with you, is Tanya had kind of warned me about some paranormal things that may occur at the battlefield. So we've actually had some weird things happen to us, but in that farmhouse at the Klingel Farm, there's a storage room at the ground level. There's a first level with a kitchen and a living room, and there's an old staircase to the top floor with a bedroom and a small studio and bathroom. And when we first arrived there, the inside of the house has been kind of modernized, but the outside is still my understanding is the original farm that was there during the actual battle. And when we first went up with the administrative officer on the first day, going up the staircase on the white wall, and this isn't drywall, this is hard wood wall, it's been plastered over, there was these tiny little white bubbles appearing on the wall, and as if the paint was blistering on the inside. And we mentioned it to the woman who was walking us through, just so she had it on the record that she didn't think we did anything to the house at the end. And she goes, yeah, we're not sure why that is happening. It started a couple months ago. We're going to have somebody come out and look at it. And that's the way it looked like for 27 straight days. And on the 27th or 28th day, I get up to go downstairs to get breakfast before I go out. And it's still kind of dark out at 4 o'clock in the morning, and as I'm looking at the wall, I'm saying something's changed. I flip the light on, and running down the wall is a whole series of red streaks from all those white bubbles, running the entire length of the wall down to the base floor. And I took pictures of it, and I don't know what it really is because the park never got back to us, but everybody I've showed the photographs to says, it looks like there's blood running down those walls.
Dude,
Ooh.
I had to do the dude because, like, dude, you shouldn't get up at 4 in the morning. But I that's when I wake up. I wake up at 4 in the morning. But I'm like, that's crazy stuff. I want to experience.
Well, the reason I got up that early is for sunrise pictures, because typically when you're up for sunrise, you're out there an hour before the actual sunrise. But and we took pictures. We've shown them to friends. I told the woman in Gettysburg, I said, you might want to have somebody come out. I said, I know there's a positively scientific explanation for this, but I said, I'd be interested to hear it. And that was just part of some of these paranormal things that happen. And we would talk to a lot of visitors, and even some of the national park people would say, especially the younger interns, some really weird things have happened to me on this battlefield too. So that's an experience that it's sort of, to me, an added bonus.
Wow. See, Tanya, that he rules on getting the best story so far on the Klingon.
That is so scary.
Every park has a unique story, and when I do some of my talks after I've shown them the slides, I then pull out some 8x10s, and I have 1 or 2 pictures from each park that each has like a 3-minute story to it. And some people, when I pass those pictures around, they said, those stories, as nice as your photography is, those stories were worth coming to this lecture just to hear those stories. And they love that story about Gettysburg. And when they look at the picture and actually have it in their hand, they're going, you stayed after you saw that stuff down the wall? I said, well, we still have more days of the residency.
I want to see it. I want that picture. I want to see it.
I would have camped out on the staircase to watch it.
I know,
like, man. Wouldn't you like to see it as it appears?
Instead of like
where
it starts.
Oh, that would have been great. And it all happened between one night, between 10 or 11 o'clock at night to 4 o'clock in the morning. And it was down the entire wall wherever these little bubbles were. And it went from the bubble as high as like 6 feet up on the wall down to the actual staircase.
That is so cool.
You know what? There's alien babies in there.
Stop it, Nancy. Nancy always says it's the aliens, but I don't believe that. I think that's trippy cool. You guys, I want to see that photo. I want to go.
We actually think it might have been somebody from the battlefield, because as you walked around and talked to people, and people would come up to me, they gave us a tag to wear, and they would start asking questions. And we met so many people in the Wheatfield area where there was a tremendous amount of battle and carnage and killing in like 3 or 4 hours one day. And where people would swear to us, they've been coming to the park, and they have, in fact, experienced these paranormal activities, especially at dusk or in the morning on those battlefields, of actually seeing their version of soldiers from 157 years ago on the battlefield.
Wow.
So you have to get to Gettysburg.
Okay, we're going to do it now, Tanya. If we're going to be in Kentucky and East Tennessee, it's not that far, right, to just hop over? We could just do a drive-by. We'll do a drive-by. I want to go to that house.
Everything over there is close.
Everything to me is close anyway. I mean, I just take a detour. Just turn right instead of left.
Right, and if you go there, I said you will definitely want to stay more than a day. You'll be there for 3 or 4 days at a minimum.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, cool. I'll plan on this, man. I'm serious. We've got to get there. we had that conversation with Chris and over there at the
Mm-hmm.
park, and ever since I'm like, dude, we gotta go.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, everyone. You can read Jim's Q&A with us, our 10 questions for park artists and residents, on nationalparktraveling.com. You can read them now, or get the summer-fall issue of Parks and Travel magazine that comes out mid-July. And here's the deal. I asked him in the questions, like, what are the 3 people you want to invite to a dinner party? And so you got to go and read the answer to that. But I want to know, Jim, don't tell anybody who it is. But would you invite them to the Klingel house for dinner just to see if anything happens to the walls at the same time?
Absolutely. In fact, if they come at that time, I wouldn't be surprised if they bring additional guests with them.
I know. Ooh. Okay. See, this is okay. Now you're digging in, dude. You're digging in. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Jim. Such a pleasure. I'm so glad we connected. And Tanya, it's always so much fun having you on the show, and love the work that you guys are doing at NPAF. Again, nationalparksartsfoundation.org is a website to go to. Incredible programs. We're hoping to get to Chaco soon. We're going to go to Death Valley. We're going to start actually getting to some of your parks, Tanya. We're getting there on this tour, and everyone. I know it's going to be cool, right? We're going to be meeting some of the artists in person, slowly but surely getting there. But nationalparksartsfoundation.org is a website to go to. Again, the newsletter is the best thing to keep informed with these opportunities, and it's for all mediums of art. Like if you're a dancer, if you're a singer, a poet, a musician, a painter, a ceramicist, a sculptor, go check it out. Photographer. They're also on Facebook and Twitter. And again, to keep up with Jim, go to photomanva.zenfolio.com. And we've got all those links up on nationalparktraveling.com. But here's your song. Jim, we love to play music for our guests, and this song is dedicated to you because you went to Gettysburg, right, and you love nature and you like history. And this is a song, we've played it a lot. We love to play this song, so it's a good excuse, too. It's called Colors of the USA. It is by our friend Doreen Taylor, who's from New Jersey, so I had to do that. So I bring it back home to you. And incredible singer-songwriter. And this song was actually written for the National Park Centennial, and it's really about how national parks and our nature and our history are part of our parks. It's called Color of the USA, and everyone, you can go to DoreenTaylorMusic.com to learn more about her. So thank you so much. Thank you both for joining us, and have a good time in your parks. Here it is.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. Thanks, Tanya.